All right. Hey, everybody, and anybody who might have joined us in the live stream that Elon linked in the announcement section, and I threw up in the short shifts chat. So wave hi if you're here. But we're going to go ahead and get started here in just a moment. But yeah, I don't know if I'm talking to anybody, but the basic idea here is we're going to spend some time talking about these preseason lines. Maybe discuss a little bit of our draft strategy and how either our drafts have been affected by some of the changes in here. I'll say this again, I think, during the actual show. Let's get it started here, and people can join us as they come to join us. Oh, you know what? I'm going to split screen here with the Trello and get the right Discord up here. Maybe I will. I'm going to steal this whole Discord post, I think. Cool. Okay. I know something wild. Oh, gross. Well, that didn't work. I have a second idea. Thank you for being patient with me here.
It's all good.
Got to get those early yips out of the system. Who did I say? So I said Florida, Buffalo, Seattle, the Rangers, Nashville, and Minnesota. Did you have you had LA on your list, right? Because we're talking about Doughty.
I actually did not. I was thinking that we could just talk about basically the power play quarterback because the rest is kind of in the air.
Sure.
Unless you want to talk about is it Lafayette? Like, how do you pronounce the
Lafayette.
So both of them are pronounced the same?
I think so. I think there's Lafreniere and there's Lafayette.
Okay, so which one is the
the Ranger is Lafreniere with an N, and Lafayette would be like if you really want to go French with it, but Lafayette, I think. So just Lafreniere for New York Rangers and Lafayette for LA.
Okay, because that's the one thing. Like, I didn't have LA on my list because I was thinking more about Doughty. But if you want to talk about them, because he actually was above Byfield, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, that was a little different from what we expected, and I do think that's pretty interesting. I was thinking about maybe trying to grab him since he has double wing eligibility.
Yeah, he was interesting. I already went with Byfield when that news came out, so I was kind of not wanting to go for a third guy.
I've been crying over losing Byfield, but maybe it's not so bad. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I need one. What am I? Seattle. Oh, and the Rangers. Sorry, I'm almost there.
Right.
NYR. So the NYR thing is just interesting because you've got Smith getting a nice opportunity, and
also they had a split power play, if I remember.
I saw that, but even if that split power play doesn't end up happening, one of Smith or Hedel will probably be up there, or unless Panarin and Trocheck. Well, we can talk about that.
All right. But either way, yeah, Smith is another guy. Like, that's pretty interesting. It's
I have been very sad about Byfield, Elon, and rightly so. I was so close. That's what I get for drafting right next to Rickard.
So the trick is you just draft no defensemen, and all your defensemen suck, and you get the forwards you like. That's how I get these guys.
That's a good point. I went
having Pietrangelo as D1.
Okay, that's pretty bad. I took Mishkov. Elon, I took Mishkov.
I mean,
so not a bad, all things considered, not a bad option, certainly. Okay.
I've always seen good things about him, so I feel pretty interested in how he's going.
definitely. All right, let's get started here. Elon says we have a clock. There it is. 5:15 is when we're actually starting. What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson. Let's try that again. 5:25. What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. I'm your host, Louis Ezekiel, and joining me tonight, your friend and mine, Shams Benamor. Shams, how are you doing? We have finished up our drafts. How are you feeling?
Well, you could say you finished up your draft. I still have my last pick, but luckily it's just the last pick. So mentally, I'm kind of there. But it's amazing how we're just talking about drafts, and now we have. Hopefully, these are not long-term injuries of headlines and everything to go through. The league is right upon us.
Yes, it's hard to avoid those preseason injuries completely. I think I had a defenseman go down with a probably broken ankle today. So these things happen, but it makes for some interesting change and certainly gives us some things to talk about here. Yeah, the plan initially, I think, was to talk a little bit about our drafts, and we'll find some self-indulgent ways to get those in here and there. But I think mainly we want to talk about the way some of these lines are shaping up in the preseason. You and I have each selected 6 teams that have at least one interesting aspect about them that we want to talk about. And we are going to try to burn through them and make this a true short shift while also giving you some important and useful information that I think will be valuable for you. So let's just get into it here. Do you want to go ahead and take the lead and tell us who the first team that you are interested in discussing is?
Right, so we're going into the are we going into the lines right away or doing the headlines first?
Oh yeah, we can do headlines. I'll adjust that. So it's 7 minutes. Well,
yeah, so I had are we just following the Trello, or I can find if we're doing a different ordering than that?
Nope, that's fine. That's fine. I will follow along with the Trello. So originally we sort of thought we might do some draft talk here, but obviously we are into the preseason and there is more interesting news than maybe who we happen to pull up in our cupful drafts. I'm sure we will find a way to discuss them here and there. It never fails. We always manage to talk about our team, so I'm not worried about that. Got a few major headlines here as well. So we'll start with some of the biggest news since the last Keeping Karlsson mega show. We'll spend a little time talking about some draft talk, and we have these preseason lines that we want to discuss. We've got 6 teams each that have at least one interesting aspect that we want to cover. So let's get right into it. What is our first big headline? I'm going to let you take this one because I drafted the guy, so I don't know that I can talk about it objectively or without bursting into tears.
It's a shame. It was basically, I feel like it was the first few shifts into the game, and Drew Doughty went down with a leg injury. It looks like, I don't know if it's been confirmed, but it looks like an ankle injury. Word is coming out that they don't know if it's a fracture or a break, and the team is still looking at it. So based off of that, I'm no doctor, but that's going to be at least into the regular season, and we'll have to wait until the team knows how much further. So big player on there on the back end and on the power play that's going to be out for at least a decent bit if it's going to be a fractured, and not sure how long it would be if it's a full break.
Yeah, I think you're never in a good position when you're hoping it's only a fracture. So less than ideal. It has given us the opportunity to get into a little bit of discussion about who that next man up might be for the Kings. Obviously, they have some very exciting up-and-comers, but the main ones that have been bandied about in the Keeping Karlsson Discord have been talking about Brandt Clarke as well as Spence as potential options. So, I think a lot of initial reaction might have been that enthusiasm about Brandt Clarke. I did not get that same warm and fuzzy feeling. I think we're only a couple days removed from the coach saying that he hopes that Clarke can come in and maybe play 15 minutes a game and give them what Matt Roy was giving them before he moved on to Washington. I said in the chat today, that did not especially sound to me like next man up kind of talk. And we do have some patrons who, know a thing or two about the Kings, who are suggesting that Spence could be the guy. I think this is a situation where, I don't think you want to go overboard drafting either of them, because neither of them could necessarily, are likely to work out. I shouldn't say it that way. I don't think that either of them is a guarantee to work out, is more along the lines of what I want to say. So if you are still in the process of drafting, make sure it has some pretty limited draft capital that you're going to spend, or if you're looking to, pick them up, it might just have to be a gut feeling until we get a little more information about how the Kings are going to line up on the power play. But I think we are in agreement that Spence is maybe the more likely option at this point, but it's not something to bet the farm on.
Yeah, especially it's like, if I was going to say it's like a 60-40 situation either way at best. And something to keep in mind as well is that Spence was already practicing on power play 2 before this injury. So it's not like, hey, this is just a guy that the team likes. It's that he already was given power play time. So it's not, a big leap for him to go from 2 to 1 in this scenario as well.
Definitely. And then just quickly, I think we do want to talk about those power play lines, as long as we're getting into a little bit of this here. That power play 1 that was practicing was Fiala, Kopitar, Kempe, Laferriere, and Doughty, obviously before the Doughty injury, with Byfield maybe surprising some people being on that second power play. Laferriere obviously has had quite a bit of success at a young age for the Kings. They said only Anze Kopitar has scored like him as a 22-year-old, but Byfield obviously is super talented as well. So I don't know that we have seen the last of power play 1 Byfield here. It may just be a matter of time. But unless they're going to go 5 forwards, it's not going to be Laferriere and Byfield up there. And, for a short-term ad, maybe Laferriere makes an appealing, late round pick just for as long as he might be up there on that power play.
Yeah, and at the very least, he is playing with Kempe and Kopitar at even strikes. So even if he doesn't go off on the power play, he still has value at even strike, depending on how deep your league is.
All right, definitely. Let's keep things moving right along here. William Nylander did not finish the game. His most recent preseason game took an awkward fall after getting pushed by a teammate and maybe took a knee to the head while he was on the ground. He was removed for precautionary reasons, so it's certainly not time to panic about Nylander, the perennial center during the preseason. But certainly something to monitor. If he gets his bell rung once or twice more, we might start to show our concern. Obviously, I think smart to get him out after that incident, but I'm not thinking that it's something that, at least as of now, is a threat to potentially push him beyond the start of the season health-wise. All right, and then let's just move on. One more item here from our. Let me try that again. One more item from our headlines before we get into a little bit of draft talk and some preseason lines. But John Gibson has had an appendectomy, that lazy little organ that never does anything for us except create problems. Taking Gibson out at a very inopportune time. He is expected to be out 3 to 6 weeks. Obviously don't want to, get hit in the puck on your stitches or anything like that. So we wish him all the best. A little more predictable, I think. I'm sure the team will be able to give a pretty clear update on his health, because we're just talking about a healing wound, which is usually a little more straightforward than trying to figure out when a bone is going to knit. But if you were someone who is relying on a late round John Gibson pickup, you may have to wait a little while longer and, troll around, maybe, Lucas Dostal is an option for you. He played quite well at times last year. So you could just do a 1-for-1 replacement if you like, or you might, just check out who is lying around, who's got a good schedule, who's got some back-to-backs coming up. But at least some short-term Gibson appendectomy concerns. So we wanted to spend at least a little bit of time talking about our drafts, indulging in ourselves a little bit here. Elon and Brian got a whole show. We're not going to spend 2.5 hours on it, certainly, although that was a very enjoyable discussion. But anything, any kind of big impressions, any big ideas that you took away from your draft that you think would be beneficial for anyone out there who may still be drafting themselves, or of interest just to people wanting to know how they feel their drafts went?
So for me, and I think this is pretty special for us because we're doing a slow draft, it will be harder to do in a normal speed one, is to recheck your assumptions as you're into the draft. Because when I was going into the draft, I was really tempted to do the zero G strategy. I love to use the waiver wire. So I'm like, I always end up with random goalies anyway. Why spend a draft pick to get one? But as I was noticing in my draft, we actually was a really tight draft and no one was really getting like out of the ordinary with their picks. So around the seventh round, I was actually able to pick up Stuart Skinner with the seventh round pick. I think he was the sixth goalie picked. And it got to a point where I was starting to look at my other options. I'm like, okay, I may have been open to zero G, but I have a chance to get a guy who showed well. Is I believe was like in the third tier of the keeping Karlsson goalie tiers, and is played for Edmonton. So at the very least, will get me good points for wins. So I was able to kind of pivot from my zero G strategy and pick up on a guy that I originally wasn't thinking of.
Yeah, really interesting there. I also went a goalie a little earlier than I am used to. Andrei Vasilevsky was available to me in the sixth round. It was right around the time when they were getting that interview where he was talking about, I'm telling coach that I want to play 70 games this season. For the first time in forever, he got some actual real rest over the summer. So I'm hoping that he is a guy who can kind of, show that he still has more in the tank than he was able to show last season. And I also, was planning on going a little lighter on defense. I ended up having Rasmus Dahlin fall to me at round 2, pick number 8. And ultimately the forwards that sort of surrounded him, I was looking at Crosby and Gensel as potential other options. And in fact, they ended up going the next 2 picks. But I did end up grabbing Dahlin. He was the only defenseman I took until Doughty in the 9th. So I was able to kind of take it easy on that pick after that. But yeah, like you said, I didn't want to be so committed to my strategy that I was going to turn down what I thought was some really solid value. I saw Dahlin mostly getting picked, in the early phases of that second round. So I was happy to have him drop to me. And I'm looking forward to rooting for Buffalo this season. I've got another Buffalo guy that we're going to talk about here in not too long. And then I guess one other thing that I tried to learn from previous years, a couple of years ago, I got really burned by Hedman and Matthews and Markstrom all kind of having bad seasons at the same time when they were my top guy at each position. And then I sort of avoided them last year and they all had nice little bounce back campaigns. So I'm trying to not let my bitterness about how a previous season went prevent me from getting good opportunities. And so, no, I didn't go and grab some of the guys who disappointed me last year, like, John Tavares, for instance, but Alex Ovechkin I had in the second round last year, and I was able to get him in the 4th this year. And I am feeling kind of good about it. We had a big debate, obviously, in the chat, but I do think that Washington has improved. Using your model of looking at where, these players were ranked by a variety of different projections. You had him as significantly ahead of a lot of the other forwards I was looking at. Thank you for letting me use your cheat sheet there, by the way. So I'm looking forward to hopefully a really nice Ovechkin season, even though he burned me so badly last year. And, I said I would rather take him again and have him play poorly than not take him and have him play well and have it cost me. So I'm doing a little bit of like psychological inventory here to help me make a good choice also. So that was another thing that I was sort of working on, just to avoid sort of having happen again down the line. Anything else from your draft that you want to talk about, or should we get into some of these preseason lines here after a little break?
So, got one last thing to piggyback on you talking about the projections. So basically what I did is I can't project myself. I'm not going to pretend that I can project, saying, hey, this is a 60-point player or whatnot. So I just coalesce a pile of them and then use that as my guide. And an interesting thing that I found was that I think we all can agree that Sanderson is probably going to be the power play 1 quarterback over Shabbat. But the interesting thing is that even with that power play being in favor of Sanderson, which is not guaranteed, but still likely, is that all of the projections I was looking at still had them at generally around the same amount of points from a couple standpoint. So while Sanderson was picked in the 10th round, which probably fits there, everyone just kind of put the stink on Shabbat, and I was able to draft him as my second defenseman in the 12th round. And sure, yes, I'm talking about a 12th round defenseman as my second defenseman, so he's not going to be the strongest, but I'm hoping that the value there of, hey, a guy producing not on the top power play can still do things, kind of like my 11th round pick, Petrangelo, kind of just taking that value of people just scared away from the non-power play one quarterbacks defense, but that will still be on the ice a lot and still getting value that way. And then I was able to take the forwards while everyone was still taking the, the pretty defensemen that were power play one quarterbacks, the middle round guys that were not, Dahlin or Yossi caliber.
Yeah, I think that's good strategy. And we talked about it a lot in the allied chats on the Keeping Karlsson Discord. Just sort of the idea that like a lot of people were saying, oh, I'm coming in, there's been this big goalie run, there's been this big D run, who's left on this list that you still like? And I'm like, well, okay, but isn't that kind of playing into your opponent's hands, right? They took their defenseman, they took their goalie, they're not going to be looking to get one coming back around. So why not grab the guys, the forwards that they left behind, and then later on when they're still not interested in those defensemen or those goalies, you'll have your pick. Like, you don't have to rush into that. And so I always think that is a smart way to go about it. You don't need to buy into a rush just because a rush is happening, or a run, I should say. You can find some extra value by avoiding the rush and going against the grain and picking against kind of who everyone else is going for, because those guys are still going to be around, right? Nobody wants to pick. Most people don't want to pick, defense or goalies in back-to-back rounds, right? So you can oftentimes still get somebody from your tier that you want without having to sacrifice that draft position. All right, we're going to take a quick little break here, and then we're going to get into some preseason lines. You're listening to Short Shifts. All right, let's get right back into it. Yeah, you good? All right. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Shams, why don't you start us off? We are just going to talk about each of us selected 6 teams that we thought had something interesting that was standing out to us with regards to the way their preseason lines were being deployed. So start us off here. Who is a team that caught your eye? I know you're always looking for interesting deployment as game day tweets is fully operational here, fully going. That means that we are getting close to the fantasy season. If you don't know, gamedaytweets.com, it gives you all of the information you need from reliable Twitter sources. It is searchable, it is sortable, and you don't have to go on Twitter to actually get it. I can't think of a better benefit than that. So lay it on us. Who's your first team?
So talking about players that disappointed you last year, I didn't go back to because the news wasn't out beforehand, but Ehlers was a draft pick I had last year, and he was stuck off a power play 1, and he was living on a line 2 that wasn't too interesting. So he didn't really hit his draft value. But big news is that actually out of camp, they're practicing with Ehlers on the top power play. So it's Ehlers, Scheifele, Cotter, and Velarde as your forwards, with Morrissey as the quarterback. So what they did is that I forget who it was, but the whole line was, oh, someone has Ehlers' spot, so Ehlers can't be on the power play. So what Ehlers did is, just, it's not rocket science. He's now learning a different position on the power play. So maybe he might not be as to the expertise of what he would have been on power play 2, but he's with so many better players, and they're doing this out of camp. So I actually have an expectation that at the very least, we're going to give this a half decent run with a new coach. Because last year, they might put him on the top line, they might put him on the top power play, and then someone sneezes wrong, and then the coach got scared and went back to the old set. So while he's still not with the best even strength, I think he's with Perfetti and Mistikov as his even strength. So yeah, Perfetti's interesting. But the nice thing though is that he now actually has a expectable power play 1, at least out of camp.
Yeah, not only better players, right, but also more time on ice, right? He can expect to be out there for, 70, 80, 90 seconds, as opposed to maybe the 30 or 40 that are left over on that power play 2 time. So, yeah, I think that's really interesting. I couldn't help myself. I posted a little Charlie Brown running to kick the football and saying, here we go, Ehlers power play 1 managers once again. Lucy's not going to pull the ball away this time, but, maybe She's going to hold that ball down, and Charlie's going to kick it, and we'll have a happy ending here. So I'm hoping for the best. I've always liked Ehlers, and I think he deserves the shot. So yeah, maybe the new coaching situation is what he wants. Speaking of guys getting a shot, just want to quickly talk about Buffalo. If you haven't already drafted, I couldn't shut up in my allied chat about how I really wanted to get JJ Peterka. He is lining up on the top line with Thompson and Tuch. And also that top power play looks like it'll be Peterka, Thompson, Tuch, Quinn, and Rasmus Dahlin. So Peterka, I think the best deployment as far as obviously getting top line and top power play, a guy who really could pop off this season. But pretty interesting there too to see Quinn, getting potential top power play time. I bring him up especially because obviously with his 2 games in Europe to start the season, he can make for a really outstanding ad or streamer. Or if somebody that you want to draft, way at the end of your draft and just hold on to for a little bit. I think that you could do a lot worse than Jack Quinn, who showed us some nice flashes last season.
Oh yeah, I'm 100% on the Buffalo trade because I got both Tuch and Peterka, so you don't have to sell me anymore on those forwards.
Yeah, you're down with the JP. As someone in my chat asked, and of course I had to respond, yeah, you know me. All right, give us your next team. Who is next up?
So an interesting situation is that out of Carolina is that with Gensel gone and just kind of also losing Kuznetsov, that maybe he's not the greatest, but he was known for his offensive prowess, is that can all agree that they have 4 forwards. They have of offensive threat. It was Necas, Aho, Svechnikov, and Jarvis. And based off of what last year was, is that the worry is that 3 of them were going to be put on the top line, which would have been the Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis, which was what last year, the Necas was going to be alone. Now, while they started with that out of camp, interestingly enough, the last 2 days is that they actually put Svechnikov with Necas. So now it's Kotkaniemi, Svechnikov, and Necas in one line, and then Roslovic, Aho, and Jarvis. So if people are not paying attention, we can take advantage of getting a bonus on Necas if people just kind of getting the stink off of him, thinking, oh, he's going to be alone. But now he actually has a powerful forward to be at least with him on the even strength. And then all of them are going to be on the power play. With a funny note is that it's actually Gostisbehere on the top power plays. It's no longer Burns, but Burns is not actually going to be the quarterback of the second, at least in practice today. I kid you not. He's the net front presence for power play 2. So maybe he might actually get more points with chip-ins and whatnot, but either way, he's now on power play 2. So keep that in mind that he's not going to be as good as Gostisbehere might be continuing what he did in Detroit in Carolina.
Well, yeah, that's really interesting. This is not the first time that we've seen this. I think that Burns, those with long memories know that he did go from being a forward to being a defender, unless I have that mistaken. And I think that at least on Fantrax for a season, he had eligibility for both. I may be fooling myself on that one, but this is not an entirely crazy plan. We have seen something like this in the past. So yeah, very interesting to see Burns take on that role. And I love what you brought up about Necas. I think that was someone who I was really leery of, and now I kind of I wish I had him a little up a little higher on my boards. Somebody was joking about all of the hate on the right wings for the Carolina Hurricanes. But yeah, it could be a really interesting opportunity. You knew we weren't going to get through the segment without spending some time in Florida. Lines wise, not very exciting, right? For Hagee, Barkov, Reinhart, Rodriguez, Bennett, Tkachuk, they just won a cup, right? They're going to roll out the crew that brought them that success. But it is on the power play that we're seeing some interesting differences. That for top power play, the 4 that you would expect, Barkov, or Hagee, Tkachuk, Reinhart, and it is Adam Boquist, who has been having some really nice preseason success. Yes, it is confusing because Jesper Boquist is out there as well, and sometimes we are getting multiple Boquists involved. But we talked about not on air, but we talked about, you bring Adam Boqvist in to be probably a power play guy. You're not looking at him for his defensive prowess, and with what that power play was able to do for a guy like Montour, who kind of went from being relatively obscure player to a 70 plus point guy 2 seasons ago. You got to feel kind of good about what we could potentially see from Boqvist in that position. So that was a guy that I know we both kind of went after somewhere in like the 16, 17 rounds area. I was worried I wasn't going to get him. I was talking about, I think Elon was saying during the live show, I was commenting like, oh man, he's going off. He's never going to come back around to me. He did manage to make it back around. So I'm pretty excited about that in terms of, an opportunity to grab some value really, really late.
Yeah, and the real nice thing about him is that the second he loses, what's the best case scenario is he keeps it, he goes off, and you got a really great value in a late round pick. But if for some reason, tomorrow you hear the news that Forsling now has it or Ekblad has it, then you could just freely just drop one of your last round picks. It was my third last pick that I picked him up, so it wasn't like any value equity, and then I could just go off and pick someone else. So it's that nice knowledge of not having to hold, a Shen and think it's like, hey, 3 weeks in, is he finally going to go off? It's like, no, you have something or you don't.
Yeah, and that's always some good early season kind of economics talk when you're thinking about fantasy sports, is don't get sucked into that feeling of that sunk cost, right? That you drafted this guy and you got to stick with them. Or like you want to make sure you give them the chance. Like you can move through people quickly at the early part of the season, and you can get a little bit more. What's the word I want to use? You get more value added over a longer period of time if you're adding someone who is going to be more successful. That opportunity cost is greater for you. Or I'm sorry, the opportunity cost is less compared to the value that you're getting because you're making that switch earlier rather than later. All right, so Shams, give us your team number 3.
So team number 3, we're going to Chicago to talk about who won the Bedard sweepstakes. And basically who we have is an interesting thing is it started slightly differently. So make sure you're keeping an eye on the lines, is that originally it was Hall with Bedard and Bertuzzi, but in the last few days, Teravainen has actually taken that Hall spot. So right now it's Hall on the second line, but with Bedard, Teravainen, and Bertuzzi on the top line. So those are now interesting with the whole, Bedard effect. All 3 of those forwards I spoke of are on the power play with Jones as the quarterback. So depending on how deep your league is, maybe Hall might have some interest, but I probably wouldn't be taking him unless I'm desperate for a left wing. But I took Bertuzzi with kind of the middle late draft pick just to have that hope of just kind of, riding with the Bedard train.
Yeah, I took Kurashev as my Mr. Irrelevant with the hope that, maybe he's on a boring line too, but he's on that power play, and it looks like he is not there right now. But maybe he can make his way back. But yeah, that's probably someone I'm going to jettison here pretty quickly so that I can pick up someone more interesting. But first, I got to deal with a Doughty who is going to hit the IR. Let's head over to Minnesota, a team that I am someone who is going to care deeply about this team this season. I took Kaprizov with my first pick. I could have had Rantanen, but I was looking at those splits. They were talking about Kaprizov and this hand injury that sort of slowed him down at the start of the season. And sure enough, he's like 5-6 fantasy points a game in Cupful for the first few months of the season. And then just absolutely went ham. I think his lowest monthly average was like 7.6, and all the other months he was over 8 points a game. So I am hoping that is the real Kirill Kaprizov. And certainly as those young players on Minnesota start to, advance and level up a little bit, I think he could benefit from there as well. But obviously the big news right now is that Matt Boldy took an injury. So as of right now, prior to Boldy's injury, it was Kaprizov with Hartman and Zuccarello, and Johansson with Eriksson, Ek, and Boldy. Since then, Eriksson, Ek has been up with Kaprizov and Zuccarello. Wait, am I reading this right? Sorry, I'm going to have to make a pause here. 34, 47.
Once again, I don't have the master sheet. Yeah. I think I just have
I'm just looking back.
I think I just have the power play up. I'm not sure if I have even strength lines at that point. I think they had split units, so I couldn't give a straight line set. Okay. Yeah.
No problem. Let's reset. So prior to that Boldy injury, it was Kaprizov lining up with Hartman and Zuccarello, with Johansson lining up with Eriksson, Ek, and Boldy. We've only seen a split performance since then, so we don't exactly have a good sense of what those even strength lines might look like. But the Kaprizov, Eriksson, Ek, Zuccarello, Hartman, Faber has been the power play one. We did see Declan Chisholm spend a little bit of time in camp on power play one over Faber. I don't think this is anything that is necessarily worrisome until Faber starts to struggle a little bit, and if we see that power play is not finding success. But I would not be like running out to grab Declan Chisholm on the assumption that he is likely to usurp Faber anytime soon. But that does look like it could be beneficial for either Zuccarello or Hartman, who is probably holding on to that spot while Boldy is out, but will probably lose it upon his return. Guessing it's Zuccarello there. That's probably the odd man out, but we can wait and see about that. But just some things to think about as Boldy heads towards recovery. And I think with that, we are halfway through. I think we've both done 3 teams. So let's burn through these last 6 and get ourselves out of here and our listeners out of here with some very useful information, I hope.
Yeah, my next team, it's a pretty simple situation. I'm talking about the Islanders. We know that the last, ever since they got Horvat onto the team, they've paired Horvat and Barzal together. And then they've been continuously looking for the next left wing to go with them. It's been Lee or someone else. It hasn't really triggered, but they have now signed Duclair, and he is now being put with the 2 offensive players, and both in camp where they've actually had, I sometimes just kind of wash away coach talk or whatnot, but there's a lot of talk about chemistry being brewed and whatnot between them. And then the nice thing was, it's not just all talk. The first preseason game together, they had, as a line, scored 5 points together. I believe it was 2 points for Duclair, 2 points for Barzal, and a point for Horvat. So they showed that it wasn't just all talk. They got this together. Obviously, people are probably going to be taking Horvat and Barzal higher in drafts because they're game commodities. But don't forget, Duclair has produced basically everywhere he has been. Maybe it's not big numbers because usually he's not put into a situation that, he's going to be on the second or third line, or maybe, no offense to the Sharks, put on a team that even if he is on the top line, he's not doing much. But now he has a chance to be put with 2 people that are really good players. And while the power play hasn't been set yet, I wouldn't be surprised if it's those 3 and then a 4th forward from somewhere else. So we got a chance of having Duclair being put with premier talent, both on even strength and on the power play, to be able to perform.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe Palmieri might round out that group, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. And I do think, there's kind of that Islanders it's kind of a boring team. I don't know if I want to watch the Islanders all season long, but don't let that, frighten you away from a good opportunity. That top line has some real offensive talent. Barzal and Horvat really, I think, had some nice chemistry last season. So I think that's good news. And that was a guy who I was not quick enough to jump on. Once you start getting into those late rounds, like you say, it's really not about looking at average draft position. It's like, I want to get my guy now because if I think he is as good as he's going to be, it doesn't matter what his ADP is. You don't necessarily need to play that game, right? And I think I got caught playing that a little bit. My next one's a quick one. Sometimes we just like to hear things that confirm what we already believe. I'm pretty sure everyone in the United States right now is doing this with their news consumption, and it's has led to no problems for us at all. But I just wanted to get the news that I was hoping to hear from Nashville, and that is that Marchessault and Stamkos, the new additions, we're going to get onto that top power play. It just made too much sense. And indeed, you've got Forsberg, O'Reilly, and Nyquist at even strength, Marchessault, Novak, and Stamkos as the second line. But that top power play, Forsberg, Stamkos, O'Reilly, Marchessault, Josi, that is, I think, a power play that has a little bit more oomph to it than maybe it did last season. I also think it should be fairly concerning for Nyquist owners or prospective owners. I dodged him. He was a guy who was way up on ADP on Fantrax and just stuck around at the top of the list. If somebody had timed out, they would have definitely grabbed him. But something like 25 of his points last season came on the power play. And if he's not getting that power play one deployment, he goes from, maybe being a 70-point guy to maybe a 55-point guy or maybe touching up a 60-point guy, but definitely not, sort of value where he was being listed. And I think that Nashville is making the right move, and I hope it works for them. I hope that power play really produces, but I do think it is probably problematic for Nyquist, although it's nice to have Brady Shea as your power play QB, and he's got a trio of young talent in Tomasino, Evangelista, and Novak to kind of help him out down there, but not somebody that I am looking at grabbing, someone who I was intentionally trying to avoid, and I would say he should probably be on waiver wires to start your season, despite his nice success last year. All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll just go off of yours and start. Okay. So talking about young talent, we got Utah that, I say that it's still weird. It might take a half a season for me to start saying that without thinking about the old team. But we got Utah with everyone, even me on the last time I was on talk about the one player per team draft. I was pumping Genther's gas, just showing it just how high I was on him and Cooley. But the interesting thing is if you look at the top line, it's actually Schmaltz, Hayton, and Keller. Neither of them are the top line, but they are playing together on even strength, Genther and Cooley. And then the interesting thing is that the power play, while not set, it looks like it's going to be Schmaltz, Hayton, Keller, and Sergachev are kind of the four set, but because of split teams and it's sometimes players taking nights off, we haven't had a full unit to see who that fifth player is going to be. But if you are thinking it's Cooley, I have a bad feeling it's not, because there was one practice where Schmaltz took the day off, so it was only Hayton, Keller, and Sergachev as the regulars, and they actually rounded out the power play with Genther and Yamamoto, who's actually there on a PTO. So he wasn't able to even crack the top power play while practicing and having both Schmaltz out. So my guess is that Genther's probably going to be in the line for there. And then there might be a situation where he's going to be on power play too. There could change, but I just wouldn't, anoint him Cooley as the power play one player.
Yeah, we've been hearing some positive talk about Yamamoto out of camp. The coach thinks he's likely to make the team, so that's exciting. But yeah, I don't imagine a nice little spot for him to have while Schmaltz is taking the night off. But probably not realistic moving forward. All right, let's jump down to New York. Some interesting top line deployment that's probably worth taking a look at. Kreider, Zibanejad, and Riley Smith. Making up that top line. That's the one that's a little different. Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere making up the second line. But yeah, Smith the coach said he was going to have an opportunity in the top six, and it looks like it'll be there alongside Zibanejad and Kreider, at least to start. Also of interest, we had some kind of split power play action. Take this for a grain of salt. We'll see how it actually plays out in the season, but it is something certainly to monitor with some of these, guys who might be available on the waiver wire. So power play one was Fox, Zibanejad, Kreider, Riley Smith, and Philip Hedl, while power play two was Jones, Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere, and Brennan Othmann. And also we had a note that Berard sometimes switched in with Othmann there. So that's kind of interesting. Just to see Panarin and Trocheck on that second power play while Smith and Hedl are on the first. I would say put a pin on that, keep an eye on it. and see if that might be a place to make some hay off of the waiver wire. If you're having a little twinge in your tummy because you drafted Panarin or Trocheck, let's not go into full panic mode quite yet. I think we could very easily see the two of them back on a fully weaponized top power play. But just a little interesting note that I think is worth keeping an eye on. I'm going to break our pattern here, and I'm going to go into my last team, and then we'll throw it back to you to wrap things up, Shams. I just wanted to talk about Seattle quickly. I think just interesting to sort of see that top line is McCann, Beniers, and Bjorkstrand. Probably not a big surprise. Again, Seattle kind of one of those teams where the top six are kind of interchangeable with each other. But then we saw some other versions of the lines come out that might be of interest. So we saw a version that was Tolvanen, Beniers, and Bjorkstrand, and then McCann, Wright, and Eberle. So that was kind of interesting. And then we saw a kind of split power play where Montour, Chandler Stevenson, Shane Wright, Eeli Tolvanen, and Jaden Schwartz made up one unit. And then we had Vince Dunn, Oliver Bjorkstrand, Jordan Eberle, Jared McCann, and Matty Beniers on that second unit. If you ask, if you're asking me which unit looks like a first unit, I think it is the Dunn unit. But it'll be interesting to see, what Montour can do in this position. Again, we're a couple years now removed from his really great season in Florida. Coming back from injury last season, he wasn't really anything special. Although he didn't have the same opportunities that he had previously. But looking at this list right now, I'm thinking that Dunn is, maybe going to get similar ice time, but looks like he is with the group that might be able to put up more points unless, maybe Wright and Tolvanen have really taken a big step forward, and Stevenson maybe can be a little more electric than he has been from what we've seen from him in his career thus far.
So on the side from you're talking about having so many forwards to a team that, I'm not sure if this is a hot take, but I'm actually kind of afraid of just their overall strength. I'm talking about the Vegas Golden Knights. Is that I'm not sure about how your ally chat went, but there was a lot of talk in ours about who to target in the second round. And a lot of people were bringing up Jack Eichel, and I was afraid of him in general. First, we're talking about the second round, and he's an injury risk, which maybe different people have different things with that. But the second thing on top of the injury risk is that who is he playing with? And on the top line, this is his line mates. It's Barbashev, who he was originally with, and then Marchessault, who we were just pumping up the tires of saying how much now Nashville is going to be with him. They replaced him with Olofsson. And he was the guy that got kicked out of, not to be too mean, he got kicked out of Buffalo with the new talent that they were able to get from draft picks from, not doing so well. So he was basically jettisoned from a non-playoff team for not being good enough. It's now going to be Eichel's line mate. And that's kind of where my worry is that I know that Eichel is a great player, in a great situation. He has history about, how he was playing well with a Buffalo team that you could say was not that great. But we're talking about the second round or early drafts, is that he was picked one pick before me, but if he was an option, I would have still taken who I took was Jake Gensel. I would have taken him without even a 1% consideration to Jack Eichel of just all of the injury concerns, the playing with. It's just too much of a worry just to take with that early pick, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think give me steady Sidney Crosby before we get into the Jack Eichel territory. I do want to quibble with your terminology a little bit. You called him an injury risk. A risk suggests that it might not happen. So he might be more of an injury guarantee. Sorry, Jack Eichel. Look, we know we love you. You do what Elon loves more than anything, which is blast pucks at the net. But yeah, a little nervy, I think, to grab him there in the second. And of course, if you listened to Derek's podcast from earlier in the week, he spent some time talking about the cupful and talking specifically about Eichel. So you can get his take there too, but it is not too far off what we had to share there. Well, this has turned into a bit of a lengthy show here, which was, that's okay. It's early season. We have not quite hit our mid-season form of really keeping things trim and pared down. And besides, we had a lot of fun stuff that we had to talk about. So if you are unhappy with the length of today's show, you can get at us, and let us know how you feel. But we had a really fun time, I think, talking about this stuff. It has been just a blast the last almost 2 weeks now, going through the slow drafts, and just, it's a fun time in the season. Everything is all potential at this point. Everyone thinks they've drafted, for the most part, I think, a great team. So it's very exciting. And yeah, can't wait to really get things started here with the games in Europe. Thanks everybody who is watching us live on the YouTube channel. We are just so happy to be back here for season 6 of Short Shifts. We'll be coming to you regularly on Wednesday and Friday mornings once the season gets underway. But in the meantime, make sure you check out Game Day Lines. You can find us at our new digs at Blue Sky, at Short Shifts Pod on Blue Sky. If you want to come chat with us there, it is a very small gathering right now, but we were able to build an empire over on X Twitter, and we can build an empire again, gosh darn it. So please give us a follow, check out our content. I'm working on putting up some analysis of each of my draft picks on there. But thank you again for listening. Thank you, Shams, for joining us and sharing your insights. Always outstanding. And I hope everybody out there is just so excited getting ready for the fantasy hockey season. And until we speak to you again, play smart and keep your shifts short. Yeah, I almost got the tagline right. I'm in mid-season form when I don't even have that bit. I gotta have the Trello open, apparently. Thanks everybody in the chat. You guys rock. Love it. And see you in our chat here, I suppose. I'll get these edit times to Elon, and yeah, you all can listen all over again in the morning. Guess keep your shifts short. Is that how I came off? I've been talking all day long. It has been a long day of teaching. I can't believe I didn't trip over my tongue more than I already did. So apologies, but thank you. All right, I'm going to end the stream here. Thanks, everybody.